Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. I never believed a single night could shape the rest of my life, but it did. My name's Aspen, though everyone just calls me Asp. I grew up in a small Pennsylvania town where neighbors waved at each other from their porches and rumors spread like wildfire across cracked sidewalks and backyard fences. From the outside, my family looked like any other. My dad, James, spent long hours at the garage by the highway, his hands always stained with grease. My mom, Claire, stayed home, keeping the house in perfect rigid order, every picture frame straight, every surface wiped twice. And then there was my older brother, Riley. Riley wasn't just my brother, he was everything to me, my protector, my partner in every reckless adventure. 2 years older, louder, braver, always first to jump a fence or talk back to a teacher. If I sneaked into a neighbor's yard and got caught, he'd take the blame without hesitation. If someone shoved me at school, he'd step in, fists clenched and jaw set, like he'd been waiting for the excuse. To me, Riley was the kind of person you believe could outrun the whole world if he had to. But in our house, there was always a tension, like a storm cloud that never drifted away. That storm was my mom's resentment toward him. To anyone looking in, she was the model housewife, calm, polite, always smiling when she handed out cookies at school events. But behind the front door, her words cut like glass, and Riley was always the target. She nitpicked everything, his slouch at the table, the way his voice carried, the grades that were never quite enough. With me, she put on a strange sweetness, syrupy and brittle, as if I were porcelain she had to handle carefully. It unsettled me more than her sharpness with Riley ever did. Dad noticed, though. Sometimes he'd snap at her. "Claire, ease up, will you? He's just a kid." But she'd brush him off and nothing really changed. Riley never fought back, at least not in front of her. He'd roll his eyes, mutter under his breath, then act like it didn't matter. But when it was just us, I'd catch glimpses of how much it weighed on him. His shoulders would sag, his grin would disappear, and sometimes he'd whisper, "I don't think she ever wanted me." Hearing him say that felt like someone had reached inside me and twisted something until it hurt. Still, Riley filled the house with laughter. He wouldn't let the weight of her bitterness smother everything. He cracked jokes at the dinner table, wrestled me in the living room, dragged me outside to climb trees even when I didn't want to. He made our home feel alive. Until the night he disappeared. It was late October, the air sharp and cold. I remember the exact scrape of the wind against the windows and the faint smell of burning leaves drifting from somewhere down the block. After dinner, Riley pulled on his jacket and said he was meeting a friend. He grinned at me, ruffled my hair, and left. He never came back. The next morning, I woke to the sound of muffled sobs. Still half asleep, I padded downstairs in my socks. Dad was hunched forward on the couch, his face buried in his hands. His shoulders shook, and I froze because I had never seen my father cry before. Beside him sat Mom, her hand resting on his back, her voice low and careful, though I couldn't make out the words. "Dad?" My voice cracked as it left my throat. He lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot, his cheeks streaked wet. "Riley?" His voice broke in half. "Riley's gone." I stood frozen in the doorway, my stomach sinking. "What do you mean gone?" He probably just crashed at Jake's. You know how he is." Dad shook his head, wiping his face with the back of his sleeve. "We checked. He never showed up there. The police were here this morning. They're looking for him." My eyes darted to Mom, searching for some sign of comfort, something that said this was just a misunderstanding. But her face was stone, her lips pressed together in a thin line, her eyes dry and unreadable. "He probably ran away," she said flatly. Dad turned toward her, his face stricken. "Claire." "Well, what else would you call it?" She snapped, her voice sharp enough to sting. "He's always been reckless." I stared at her, hardly able to breathe. My chest tightened until it hurt, tears pricking at my eyes. "He wouldn't leave me," I whispered, shaking my head. Not without saying anything. But the days bled into weeks, and Riley didn't come back. His face stared down at us from faded flyers stapled to telephone poles and taped to shop windows. The police questioned everyone they could think of, his friends, neighbors, even our teachers, but every lead withered into nothing. By winter, the investigation went cold. Our house felt hollow, like the life had been sucked out of it. Dad spent his nights alone in the garage, nursing cheap beer, staring at tools he no longer touched. I cried myself to sleep so often the pillow stayed stiff with salt. And Mom, God, Mom seemed lighter, like she had shed a weight we didn't understand. She scrubbed floors, hummed under her breath while cooking, moved through the house with a kind of relief that made me want to scream. Then, one night in December, everything changed. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, tossing, the air sharp and cold against my cheeks. The house was silent, too silent, like it was holding its breath. And then I heard it. Footsteps, quick and light, moving across my room. My heart stopped. I sat up, squinting into the darkness. Then came the laugh, a low, familiar chuckle. "Pranked you?" I froze, blood turning to ice. That voice, I'd know it anywhere. "Riley," I breathed. He stood at the foot of my bed, hair messy, his grin wide and boyish. He looked so real it hurt. I stumbled forward, nearly knocking over my lamp. "Where were you? Do you know how scared we were? Do you know?" But Riley only laughed again, louder this time. It wasn't his old laugh. It was brittle, jagged, like glass under strain. "Come on, Asp," he said, his tone too bright, too sharp. "Let's go play in Mom and Dad's room." The request felt wrong. We'd never played in their room. But I was so desperate, so starved for him, that I didn't stop to question it. Maybe it was him. Maybe I was dreaming. We ran down the hall, my heart hammering with both fear and joy, and burst into my parents' room. I leapt onto the bed, shouting, "Dad, Mom, look, it's Riley, he's back." Dad jolted awake, his eyes bleary with sleep. "Aspen, what are you talking about?" He scanned the room, confusion etched on his face. There's nobody there. Panic clawed at my throat. I spun toward him, pointing desperately. "He's right here. Don't you see him?" Dad's face crumpled. He pulled me against his chest, whispering, "You're dreaming of him, sweetheart. It's okay. I miss him too." But Mom wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking at Dad. She was staring directly at Riley, her face drained of color, her lips trembling, eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. "You see him?" I hissed. "You see him too?" Riley's grin widened unnaturally, stretching across his face. His teeth blackened, jagged, as his eyes burned red, pupils swallowed in darkness. He sank onto the bed, onto the exact spot, at the exact time of night. Mom let out a strangled sob because she knew. That was the place. That was the night she killed him. At first I couldn't process it. My mind refused to shape the truth, but the pieces slid together all the same. Her venom toward him, his sudden disappearance, her strange lightness afterward. "Mom." My voice cracked as the words tore out of me. "What did you do?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Riley's voice cut through the room, deeper now, colder, heavy with something inhuman. "Now she sees me too." And then he was gone. Life after that night rotted slowly. Dad never learned the truth, but suspicion gnawed at him like rust. He and Mom drifted apart until the house sagged under silence, their marriage a corpse neither of them bothered to bury. I carried the truth like a brand on my chest, the knowledge that my mother had taken Riley from me. I hated her more than I thought hate could stretch. But worse than that, Riley never really left. Some nights I woke to footsteps pacing the hall. Other times a low laugh outside my door or the shape of a shadow just beyond the glow of my lamp. He was there, waiting, not only haunting her, haunting me too. I used to believe that no matter what happened, no matter how unfair or brutal life could be, family was the one anchor you could trust. I don't believe that anymore. I grew up in a small industrial town in southern Indiana, where the steel mills and freight yard were the pulse that shaped everything. They stamped their rhythm into our houses, into our voices, into the way we carried our tempers. My father pulled endless shifts at the plant, and my mother worked nights as a nurse in the county hospital. That meant most of the time it was just me and my older brother Kyle, left to manage things. Kyle was 3 years older, but it always felt like he was decades ahead of me. Taller, broader, stronger, and brimming with the confidence I never had. As kids, I followed him everywhere, desperate to be noticed, desperate to belong in his world. Sometimes he'd let me tag along, but more often he shoved me away with a sneer. Asterisk quit being a shadow, he'd say, and I'd feel smaller than I already was. When Mary was born, I was 10 and Kyle was 13. At first, she was just a fragile little body in a crib, another task dropped on our overworked family. But she had this smile, wide and golden, like sunlight breaking through dirty glass. For a while, it softened Kyle's edges. I remember him lifting her when she cried, whispering clumsy lullabies under his breath. For that brief stretch of time, we almost looked like a normal family. But we weren't. Not really. Dad's drinking grew heavier after the mill cut his hours. Mom moved through the house like a ghost, her body present at dinner, but her mind still wandering sterile hospital corridors. And Kyle. Kyle swallowed all of it. He grew restless, angry, filled with a bitterness too heavy for a kid his age. By 16, he'd started to resemble the worst version of Dad when whiskey had him by the throat. He mocked me for everything. My grades, my thin frame, the fact that books were my only friends. Asterisk weak, asterisk he'd spit, the same word Dad once used on him. And sometimes, when the tension in the house pressed too hard, he turned that cruelty toward Mary. He never hit her, but words can bruise deeper than fists, and she carried the weight of his insults in her quiet, nervous glances. I told myself it was just a phase, that once Kyle got older, once life steadied out, maybe he'd change. But deep down, I knew better. By the spring of 1981, things were unraveling for good. Dad collapsed from a heart attack at the mill, gone before the ambulance even arrived. Mom buried her grief under double shifts, working herself numb. That left the house to me, 17, and Kyle, 20. Kyle had already dropped out of community college. He spent his days drinking in the basement or shooting pool with a crew of bitter men loitering around the boarded-up gas station. No job, no ambition, just simmering rage that spread to everything he touched. And then came Elma. She wasn't just some girl he picked up, she was mine first. We met in the library, of all places, and built something real in that quiet refuge of dust and paper. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. But Elma, like everyone else, drifted into Kyle's orbit. He had that rough charm, that reckless confidence that always seemed to pull people toward him. Before long, she was his. He didn't even pretend to hide it. One night I cornered him, desperate for some explanation, some sliver of remorse. He just smirked and said, "Face it, little brother, she was never going to stay with a weakling like you." Something in me cracked that night. It was April, Easter Sunday, when everything finally collapsed. Mom insisted on hosting dinner, clinging to tradition as if it could hold us together. She wanted one thing, just one, to feel the same after Dad's death. Kyle arrived late, reeking of liquor, Elma clinging to his arm. Behind them trailed her 2 kids from her old relationship, and Mary, now 14, hovered nearby, her innocence dimmed by unease she didn't yet have words for. I sat through most of it in silence, nursing a watered-down beer, letting Kyle's insults wash over me like acid. He mocked my grades, sneered at how I hadn't gotten into college yet, called me Mom's failure project. Mom tried to shut him up, but her voice had lost its edge. It carried no weight anymore. At one point, Kyle leaned across the table, His breath stank of liquor, his words low enough for only me to hear. "You know," he said, eyes glittering with cruelty. "Maybe if you were a man, Elma would have stuck with you, but she made the right choice." The fork in my hand trembled. I felt heat crawling up my neck. Across the table, Mary's eyes flicked to mine, wide and uncertain, like she could sense the storm rising inside me. After dinner, the kids bolted for the backyard, squealing as they searched for Easter eggs among the patchy grass. The sun sagged low, spilling orange light through the kitchen window. Shadows lengthened across the yard, stretching like thin fingers. Inside, Mom and Elma scraped plates and clattered dishes in the sink. The air smelled faintly of ham and soap. Kyle leaned back in his chair, glass in hand, smirking at me like he'd just won a battle I didn't know we were fighting. Something inside me cracked then, quietly like ice splitting on a pond. I pushed back from the table. "Where are you going?" Mom asked without much interest, stacking cups in the sink. "Upstairs," I muttered. My voice barely carried, but no one stopped me. In my room, I opened the old wooden trunk at the foot of my bed. It creaked like it resented me. Inside, wrapped tight in oilcloth, was Dad's .357 revolver. He always claimed it was for protection, though we all knew it had been more a weapon of intimidation when he was drunk. I hadn't touched it in years. But that night, my hands moved on their own. Calm, mechanical, like I was following a script already written. When I came back downstairs, laughter floated in through the screen door. Kyle was alone in the kitchen now, pouring himself another drink. He glanced up and smirked again. "What?" he said, sneer curling his lip. "Finally gonna grow a backbone?" For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink under his words. I lifted the revolver. The smirk faltered. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice cracked, thin around the edges. "You took everything from me," I said. My voice sounded wrong, too steady, too calm, like it belonged to someone else. Then I pulled the trigger. The shot split the kitchen open, a thunderclap that left my ears ringing. Kyle's head snapped back. He hit the counter and slid to the floor, blood spreading across the cracked linoleum in a dark, spreading bloom. Elma screamed. The sound tore out of her but died halfway when I turned the barrel on her. One shot. Silence. Mom stood frozen, a plate in her hands, soap bubbles sliding down her wrists. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Just a soft breath, more disbelief than anything else. I don't know if it was anger, pity, or some hollow inevitability that made me do it. But I pulled the trigger again. She dropped where she stood, glass shattering at her feet. The back door banged open. The kids tumbled in, their laughter twisted into shrieks as they saw the scene. The red, the stillness. Mary's voice cut through the noise, sharp and desperate. "Stop, please stop." But I couldn't. My vision narrowed, my body running on something beyond thought. The revolver roared again, and again, until the screams broke off into silence, leaving only the high, metallic ringing in my ears. When it was over, the house was drenched in blood. 11 lives gone. My family, my tormentors, my rivals, my only constants, all scattered across the rooms of that house. I sat on the couch, revolver heavy in my lap, staring at the wallpaper until it blurred. Hours bled together before I picked up the phone. My fingers dialed on their own. "I killed them," I told the dispatcher, my voice flat. The police arrived in a rush of flashing lights. One officer gagged and vomited into the bushes. Another whispered, "Christ Almighty." Like prayer had deserted him. I didn't resist. I let them cuff me. The trial was the town's main event. Neighbors took the stand, describing me as quiet, polite, the boy no one thought capable of harm. My lawyer tried the insanity defense, depression, isolation, years of abuse stacked against me. But the jury didn't buy it. They saw the truth. This wasn't madness. This was rage. Cold, calculated, deliberate, convicted on all counts. 11 life sentences, no parole. Now, decades later, I sit in this gray-walled cell, hands trembling with age. The revolver long gone, but its weight still heavy in my memory. Every night I replay that Easter Sunday. I hear Mary's voice screaming my name. I see Kyle's face in that final moment. Not cruel, not mocking, but afraid. I once believed family was the one thing you could always rely on, but family was the thing that broke me, and in return, I broke it. That is the legacy I will carry to my grave. I never really thought about how fragile family balance could be until the year it all shifted in my house. I was 17 then, stuck in the small town of Mill Haven, a place tucked between endless cornfields and long stretches of two-lane roads where nothing much ever happened. Everyone knew everyone else's business and life was nothing if not predictable. My mom, Clara, pulled grueling 12-hour shifts as a nurse at the county hospital, while my dad, Joseph, spent his days under the hood of cars at a local garage. They lived by routine, by stability, and I'd grown up believing that foundation would never crack. For as long as I could remember, it had been just the four of us, me, my parents, and my little brother Ryan, who was 4 years younger. Ryan was different. Even as a toddler, he wasn't the warm, playful type. He clung to my mom like a shadow, bristled with jealousy whenever attention shifted, and had this unnerving habit of staring at people, long, unbroken stares that made you squirm before he finally blinked. Still, he was my brother, and I thought I understood him in ways others didn't. Then came the surprise. It was a cool fall evening when my mom sat us down at the dinner table. I remember the way her hands trembled slightly as she set her fork down, the way she exchanged a quick glance with my dad before speaking. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice laced with nervous excitement. "I'm pregnant." The words knocked the air out of me. My fork clattered against the plate. "Wait, are you serious?" I blurted, my eyes darting between her and my dad. "Yes," she said, smiling faintly. My dad reached across and squeezed her hand, his own grin steady and proud. "You're going to have another sibling." A strange warmth spread through me. The thought of another child in the house, maybe even a sister, lit something inside me I hadn't expected. Wow, Mom. That's amazing," I said, the words tumbling out almost breathlessly. But Ryan's reaction was the opposite. His nose wrinkled, his chair scraped harshly against the floor as he pushed back. "I don't want another baby," he muttered, his voice sharp with bitterness. "I want things the same." "Ryan," my dad said gently, trying to steady him. "You'll be a big brother now, that's special." "I don't care," Ryan snapped before storming down the hall and slamming his bedroom door. At first I brushed it off as childish jealousy. He was 9 after all. Kids get territorial. But as the months passed, his resentment didn't soften. It calcified. The day my baby sister was born, my world shifted again. They named her Lily. I remember standing in the hospital room, the smell of antiseptic and soft beeping machines filling the air, while my mom cradled this impossibly small bundle wrapped in a pastel blanket. I leaned closer, catching a glimpse of her pink cheeks and wisps of dark hair. My chest swelled with something fierce, protective. "She's beautiful," I whispered, holding her when Mom finally let me. But in the corner, Ryan stood stiff, arms crossed like a fortress. His lips pressed into a thin, angry line. When Mom asked if he wanted to hold Lily, he jerked his head. "No, I don't like her. I don't like..." Mom's smile faltered, her eyes softening with forced patience. "It's okay," she said, her voice too light, too hopeful. Dad rested a hand on Ryan's shoulder and murmured, "You'll warm up to her. You'll see." But he didn't. If anything, he froze over more. The months that followed tested all of us. When Mom's maternity leave ended after 3 months, she had no choice but to return to the hospital. Dad couldn't afford more time off either. That left me stepping in whenever I was home from school. I didn't resent it. I loved it, actually. I'd rock Lily to sleep, hum soft songs when the house was quiet, change her tiny diapers, and sometimes just sit there staring at her little fists curling and uncurling like she was still discovering what her body could do. Ryan wanted no part of it. If Lily cried, he'd clap his hands over his ears and yell for someone to make her stop. If Mom or Dad fussed over her, he'd sulk or break into tantrums. It was like Lily's very existence gnawed at him. One night at dinner, Lily sat in her high chair, babbling happily and smearing food across her tray. I smiled at her, but Ryan leaned closer to me, his voice low and bitter enough for only me to hear. "I wish she wasn't here," he muttered. The words chilled me more than I wanted to admit. I snapped my head toward him. "Don't say that." Ryan didn't flinch. His blue eyes locked onto mine, cold and unblinking. "She ruined everything." I leaned in, lowering my voice, my anger spilling out in a sharp whisper. "Ryan, she's a baby. She didn't ruin anything." "Yes, she did. They don't care about me anymore." "That's not true, and you know it." The corner of his mouth twitched upward, the faintest smirk breaking across his face. "You'll see." The way he said it made my stomach tighten, like a knot twisting itself deeper. That summer, things only got worse. One afternoon, both of my parents were working long shifts. Normally, my grandmother came by to watch us, but she had a doctor's appointment she couldn't miss. That left me in charge of Ryan and Lily for a few hours. "It's just until dinner," Mom said as she bent down to kiss my cheek before leaving. Her tone was light, reassuring, but her eyes lingered on me like she wanted to make sure I believed it. "You'll be fine. Call us if there's anything." "I've got it covered," I told her, forcing a smile, trying to sound confident. At first, it really was fine. Lily had fallen asleep upstairs in her crib, her little breaths soft and steady. I picked up around the living room while Ryan sprawled on the carpet with his action figures. The TV murmured quietly in the background, a low hum mixing with the buzzing of cicadas drifting in through the open window. The house felt calm, almost peaceful. Then Lily started crying. At first, I figured it was her normal hungry wail. I sighed, set the remote down, and headed for the stairs. But halfway up, something about the sound froze me. It wasn't just crying. It was sharper, more frantic, pain edged into every note. My chest tightened. "Ryan?" I called, my pulse quickening. "What's going on?" Silence. I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time. The moment I rounded the corner, the hiss of running water hit me. The bathroom door was wide open, light glaring. Lily was in the tub, her tiny body twisting and kicking, her face blotchy red as she screamed. Water rushed from the faucet, scalding hot steam already curling up into the air. Ryan stood above her, his small hand gripping the faucet knob, his expression disturbingly calm. "Ryan!" I screamed. My body moved before my brain caught up. I lunged, scooping Lily out of the tub with one arm and slapping the faucet off with the other. She was sobbing, fists thrashing, her skin flushed pink, but, thank God, no blisters. My hands shook violently as I wrapped her in a towel, pressing her against my chest. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "You could have burned her." Ryan just stared at me, blank at first. Then, slowly, his lips curved into that same awful smirk. "She deserves it." The floor seemed to drop out beneath me. "Are you insane? She's a baby." "She took everything from me," he said, his tone flat, almost detached. "They don't love me anymore. They only love her." "That's not true," I yelled, rocking Lily as she wailed in my arms. "You're their son too. You're my brother. But this is sick, Ryan." He lifted his shoulders in a small shrug, as if my words slid right off him. "I don't care." I clutched Lily tighter, my arms trembling so badly I could barely keep hold of her. Her cries slowly softened into hiccups, but I didn't dare set her down. I stayed planted on the couch in the living room for hours, Lily in my arms, until the front door finally opened. The second Mom and Dad stepped inside, I blurted everything out. My words tumbled over each other as I described what I'd seen, what Ryan had done. Mom's face drained of color, her lips trembling as she reached for Lily and pulled her close. Dad turned toward Ryan, his eyes blazing with disbelief. "Is this true?" he demanded. Ryan stared back at him, silent, unyielding. "Ryan, answer me!" Dad's voice cracked like a whip. Finally, Ryan whispered, "I don't like her. I never will." Mom broke into tears, clutching Lily to her chest as though she could shield her. Dad dragged a hand down his face, his jaw clenching so tight it looked painful. "That's it, he needs help." By the next week, they had him in therapy. The counselor reassured them it was normal sibling jealousy, that it could be managed. But I knew better. I knew what I'd seen in Ryan's eyes that day. The eerie calm as Lily screamed, the faint satisfaction that lingered on his face. That wasn't ordinary. Even now, years later, the memory stalks me. Sometimes when I'm home, sitting around the dinner table, I'll catch Ryan, now a teenager himself, stealing a glance at Lily. And there it is again, that faint, familiar smirk tugging at his mouth. It's enough to make my blood run cold. I never believed one night could completely flip the way I saw the world, but it did. My name's Nathan Cole, and when this happened, I was 15. My sister Lily was 10. We grew up in this quiet neighborhood on the edge of Brookhaven, Massachusetts, the kind of place where people brag about never locking their doors and act like tragedy only belongs in the evening news. But I learned quick that bad things don't care about zip codes. Our house was nothing fancy, just a white two-story colonial with blue shutters at the far end of a cul-de-sac. Dad, Richard Cole, worked construction. He'd come home late most nights with his boots muddy, clothes streaked with plaster dust, sweat dripping into his beard. Mom, Elaine, taught high school English, the kind who'd stop you mid-sentence at dinner to correct your grammar, then go right back to passing the potatoes. Lily and I couldn't have been more different. I was sarcastic, restless, always hiding behind my guitar or lost in a video game. She lived in her head, quiet, dreamy, convinced fairies and ghosts still hovered in the corners of her world. She filled notebooks with drawings of princesses and whispered to me about shadows that moved funny in her closet. I teased her, of course. That's what older brothers do. But deep down, I knew she was tuned into things I wasn't. That Saturday, January of 2019, Mom and Dad had a colleague's anniversary party down in Providence. They told us not to expect them before 3 in the morning. In the kitchen, Mom leaned against the counter, arms folded, giving me her checklist. "Nathan, you're in charge tonight. No junk food after 11, Lily in bed by 10. And please don't let her marathon those superhero movies. You know she'll never sleep." I rolled my eyes and smirked. "Relax, Mom. I've got this." Dad clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Just keep the doors locked, son. Call us if anything happens." "We'll be fine," I promised. They kissed Lily goodbye and stepped out. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed seemed to stretch across the whole house, making it feel bigger, emptier. Lily immediately begged, "Can we please watch Infinity War in the living room?" I sighed but caved, throwing popcorn in the microwave while she curled under a blanket. For a while it was easy. We laughed, argued over which Avenger was cooler, and forgot we were technically unsupervised. By the time the credits rolled, it was nearly 11:30. "You're done," I told her, watching her rub her eyes. "Please, just one more episode of something," she whined, voice thick with sleep. "Nope. Mom's orders. Teeth. Bed." She stomped upstairs, muttering under her breath, while I flipped over to Logan *. Darker, heavier, definitely not for Lily. When it ended, I checked my phone. 2:04 a.m. I stretched, collected the empty bowls, when I heard faint footsteps on the stairs. I turned, confused. Lily stood halfway down, her face pale, hands twisting at the hem of her pajama shirt. "What are you doing up?" I whispered. She didn't answer right away. Her lips trembled before she spoke. There's someone in my closet." At first, I thought she was just spinning another story, clinging to that wild imagination. But Lily wasn't the prank type, not at 2 a.m. "Lily," I said gently, "you probably just heard the house settling. Windy night." Her eyes welled with tears. "No," I saw him. He was standing inside. He told me he wanted to touch me. The way she said it, flat, broken, terrified, froze me. "That's not funny," I whispered, my chest tightening. "Don't say stuff like that." "I'm not joking, Nate," she hissed, gripping the railing with shaking fingers. He was tall, black hair, and he was smiling. Something in her voice, deadly serious, trembling, made my stomach knot. "All right," I muttered, forcing steadiness I didn't feel. "Let's go check." We climbed the stairs together. The hallway stretched ahead, dim except for the faint glow of the nightlight outside her door. My heart thudded so hard it hurt, but I kept telling myself there'd be nothing there. Maybe Lily just saw her jacket hanging weird, or maybe shadows were playing tricks on her tired mind. That's what I kept telling myself as we stepped into her room. I flicked on the light switch and the place lit up instantly. Pink curtains swayed faintly by the window. Her little bookshelf leaned under the weight of too many paperbacks. Stuffed animals were scattered like an army across the floor. Everything looked normal. Everything except that closet door shut tight on the far wall. "See?" I forced a smirk, trying to sound casual. "Nothing here." Lily stayed rooted at the doorway, knuckles white around the frame. I walked over, heart thumping so hard it echoed in my ears, and wrapped my hand around the knob. Without giving myself time to think, I yanked it open. My stomach dropped. Inside, hunched just enough to fit beneath the frame, was a man. He was tall, easily 6 feet, with greasy black hair falling past his shoulders. His face looked like it had been carved out of bone, gaunt and pale, with stubble spreading across his jaw like dirt. His eyes, huge, glassy, unblinking, locked onto mine, and he smiled. A smile that didn't belong in a child's bedroom. For a heartbeat, my brain refused to process it. This was supposed to be impossible. Monsters under the bed weren't real. Houses didn't just sprout strangers from the shadows. But he was here. And rage surged up in me, hot and blinding. He'd been in her room, watching her sleep. He told her he wanted to touch her. I didn't think. I lunged. My fist connected with his throat and he gagged, stumbling forward. Adrenaline roared in my ears as I shoved him hard against the wall. "Run, Lily!" I shouted. She bolted, screaming down the hall. The man clutched at his neck, gasping. But he was stronger than I'd expected. His hand swung wide and grazed my jaw, pain bursting along my face. I stomped down on his shin, then rammed my knee into his stomach. He folded, wheezing. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Rage had me by the throat. I kicked his face once, twice, again and again until blood sprayed the carpet. His nose crumpled sideways, his breath ragged, but even through the blood, through the blows, he kept smiling. His eyes never left me. That smile said I wasn't hurting him. I was just entertaining him. Terror punched through my rage. I staggered back, chest heaving, then spun and bolted after Lily. She'd locked herself in the upstairs bathroom, sobbing. I pounded on the door. "It's me, open up." A shaky crack of the door, and I slipped inside, slamming it shut behind me. My hands trembled so hard I could barely unlock my phone. I punched in 911. "There's a man in our house," I gasped when the operator picked up. "He was in my sister's closet. He tried, please, you need to send someone now." They promised help was on the way. I hung up, immediately calling Mom and Dad, spilling everything through choked tears. Mom screamed into the phone, her voice sharp with panic. "Stay put. We're coming home. Don't open that door." So we waited. Huddled on the cold bathroom floor, my arms wrapped around Lily, listening to the silence press in. For a while, nothing. Then, creaks, floorboards groaning, slow, deliberate footsteps in the hall. Lily buried her face into my chest. I held her tight, whispering prayers I'd never said before, begging the lock to hold. 10 minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Then, sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the bathroom window, the sound of boots pounding down the hallway, voices shouting, "Police!" An officer guided us downstairs. My whole body shook as I tried to explain, describing the man in detail. Mid-40s, tall, greasy black hair, pale, strong, laborer's build. They searched every inch of the house. Lily's room, the closet, the basement, the hall. But he was gone. Not a window broken, no sign of forced entry. One officer muttered, crouching near the smear of blood staining Lily's carpet. Another officer turned to me, gentle. "Are you sure you saw someone?" I snapped, my voice breaking. "I didn't imagine him. I hit him. He bled on the floor." They exchanged uncertain looks but didn't argue. One stayed parked outside until dawn. The week after, I barely slept. Lily refused to set foot in her room, curling up in mine every night. Every creak of the house sent us jumping, holding our breath. Then came the call. Police told my parents they'd arrested a man in Danbury, hiding out in an abandoned shed. Gerald Pike, 46, a drifter, a record full of trespassing, burglary, child endangerment. He matched my description perfectly. He'd been breaking into homes for months, slipping into children's rooms, watching them sleep. If Lily hadn't seen him, if I hadn't opened that closet. The thought makes me sick. It's been months, but I still can't walk past her door without picturing that smile in the dark. And I keep wondering, how long had he been there? How many nights had he watched her without us knowing? Lily doesn't talk about fairies or monsters anymore. She just keeps her closet door nailed shut. As for me, I don't sleep much. Because some nights in the silence around 3 a.m., I hear the floorboards creak. And I wonder if maybe Gerald Pike wasn't the only one. I grew up in a small Midwestern town where the nights felt unnaturally quiet, like the world itself was holding back a secret. Sometimes I wondered if it was the cornfields on the edge of town, the way the tall stalks seemed to swallow sound, muffling even the crickets and the wind. Other times I thought maybe it was just me, my imagination running wild, but I remember lying awake in my bed and feeling it in my chest, that sense of stillness that pressed against your ears until you almost believed you'd gone deaf. And in that silence, it was always me and my twin brother, Joe. We were fraternal twins, though strangers swore we looked identical when we stood side by side. People pointed out the same tilt of our noses or the way our shoulders squared at the same angle. But to me, the differences were obvious. Joe had sharp edges, his jawline cut cleaner, his dark hair falling into place no matter how often he ruffled it with his hand. I was softer around the face with lighter hair that looked washed out under fluorescent lights, and I always seemed a little more tired than him, even when I wasn't. We got used to the curious stares and the same old questions. Do you guys read each other's minds? Someone would laugh, like they were the first to ever say it. We'd roll our eyes, sometimes play along with a creepy twin act, but the truth was simpler. Sharing a womb didn't make us psychic. It just made us close, sometimes too close. Most kids we knew had their own bedrooms by the time they hit middle school. Joe and I didn't. We shared a room straight through to graduation. It wasn't about money or space. Our house was a 2-story colonial with 4 bedrooms, the kind of place my dad bragged about when he had coworkers over. But when I was 6, he claimed one of those extra rooms as his home office. He was a lawyer, always drowning in files, and Mom drilled it into us that his work kept food on the table. That was her phrase, sharp as a rule. So that room was off limits, and we ended up with bunk beds. I got the top, Joe took the bottom. That arrangement shaped more of our lives than I think either of us realized. Joe hated when I climbed down half asleep in the middle of the night, my foot brushing his arm as I searched for the ladder. I hated how restless he was, tossing until the springs whined, jolting me awake. Sometimes I imagined what it'd be like if I had 4 walls and a door of my own. But then again, without Joe's steady breathing below me, I think I would have felt lost. By 15, we'd settled into patterns so familiar they felt permanent. Joe was the social one, always slipping out of the house, always glued to his phone, texting 3 girls at once. Teachers liked him, but they kept an eye on him too, waiting for him to push a joke too far. I was the quieter one. I had a couple of close friends, but I preferred staying home, sinking hours into the cracked screen of my old Android phone. I'd downloaded an emulator and replayed blocky old NES games, their tinny soundtracks and predictable patterns like a safety blanket I could fold myself into. The summer of our 15th year was brutal. The kind of heat that clung to your skin even after a shower, that made the drywall feel damp if you pressed your hand to it. At night, the air barely moved. Joe cursed the ceiling fan for spinning uselessly, stripped down to boxers, sheets bunched at his feet. I'd lie on the top bunk, staring at the faint orange glow bleeding through our curtains from the streetlight, counting his breaths in the dark. And then came the night I'll never forget. That evening, Joe went to bed early. Too early. Usually he'd be up late, his phone buzzing every other minute with texts and snaps. But when I climbed up to my bunk around midnight, I glanced down and saw him curled on his side under the thin sheet. His chest rose and fell in deep, even rhythm, the kind you only hear when someone's fully gone. I pulled out my phone, the soft blue glow lighting the underside of the ceiling, and opened *Dragon Warrior* again. I kept the sound off, fingers moving quietly, letting the endless grind of slimes and level-ups keep me company while the house sat silent around me. It couldn't have been more than an hour before the inevitable happened. My bladder refused to let me keep lying there. I sighed, tucked the phone beneath my pillow, and swung my legs over the edge. My toes brushed against Joe's blanket as I felt for the ladder. He stirred, muttering something that sounded half like a word, half like a groan. "Sorry, man," I whispered automatically. He didn't answer, just rolled onto his side with a heavy exhale. The bathroom was directly across the hall. I flipped on the light, blinking hard at the sudden brightness, then relieved myself in the kind of silence that made the hum of the refrigerator downstairs sound deafening. When I stepped back into the hallway, I eased the door open. For just a second, the hallway light cut into our room, stretching shadows across the carpet. Joe groaned, flopped onto his stomach. "My bad," I muttered again, pulling the door shut and climbing back up the ladder. I dropped onto my mattress and let out a breath. That's when I noticed it. The green LED blinking on my phone from under the pillow. A notification. At that hour, my stomach knotted instantly. I tapped the screen. It was a text. From Joe. "Hey bro, I'm gonna be out late with my girlfriend. Can you cover for me?" At first I thought it was a joke. I stared at the message until the words seemed to blur, then typed back slowly. "Very funny. You're literally in the bed below me." Almost immediately the reply came. "No, I'm not. Why would I joke about this? I'm at Emma's. Don't tell Dad, okay?" The hairs on my arms rose. My skin felt too tight. I looked down over the edge of my bunk. I could see Joe's silhouette clear as anything, his chest lifting and falling in steady rhythm, the shape of his shoulder under the thin sheet. My thumbs shook as I typed, "I can see you. This isn't funny." The response was instant. "Joseph, I swear to God I'm not home. If someone's in the room with you, get out." It was like the air got ripped out of my lungs. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I threw myself off the top bunk, skipping the ladder entirely, crashing hard onto the floor. Pain jolted up my ankle, but I scrambled anyway, clawing at the doorknob. My hand trembled so bad I almost missed it. And then, God help me, I looked back. I flicked the light on. The bottom bunk was empty. Sheets rumpled into the exact hollow shape of a body, but no body there. "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. I staggered closer, yanked the blanket back. Nothing. My pulse hammered so loud it drowned out every sound. I crouched and shoved my face to the floor, heart slamming against my ribs as I forced myself to look beneath the bed. Empty. I ripped the closet doors open. Empty. Behind the door. Empty. The room was bare, but I knew someone had been there. I bolted down the hall, slamming my fist against my parents' door until Dad's groggy voice broke through. "Joseph, what the hell?" There was someone in the room," I stammered, my throat closing. "Joe's not home. He texted me, but I swear, Dad, someone was in his bed, breathing." Dad's face shifted instantly. Sleep vanished. He was up, robe half on, his voice sharp now. "Stay here, Margaret. Call the police if I say so." We tore through the house. Dad with a baseball bat gripped so tight his knuckles whitened, me trailing behind with my heart beating like it was trying to punch its way out. Every closet, every bathroom, the basement, the garage. Nothing. No forced locks, no open windows. Nothing out of place. By the time we finished, sweat slicked my back. Mom rubbed my shoulder gently, her voice hushed like she was soothing a child. "Honey, maybe you dreamed it." I didn't. My voice cracked on the word. I swear to God I didn't. Almost an hour later, the front door clicked. Joe walked in, reeking faintly of Emma's perfume, shirt wrinkled like he'd been pressed against a car seat too long. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes darting between the three of us. Dad's glare was razor sharp. "Your brother says you weren't home, but he also says someone was in your bed." "Explain." Joe frowned. "I wasn't home," I told him. "I was at Emma's." My throat tightened so hard it hurt. "Then who the hell was in your bed?" No one answered. That night, I sat on the living room couch staring at the dead TV screen, its black reflection swallowing me whole. My parents drifted back upstairs. Joe went to bed, confused, maybe a little unsettled, but not shattered the way I was. I didn't close my eyes until sunlight broke through the curtains. The years since haven't dulled it. If anything, the memory has sharpened. I still hear that breathing sometimes. The slow, deep rhythm that doesn't belong to anyone I know. I still see the impression of a body under sheets when I close my eyes. And worst of all, even now in my own apartment miles away from that house, I sometimes wake in the dark with my skin cold and tight, my heart hammering. Because I hear it again. That same steady sound of someone breathing in the room with me. Slow, deep, familiar, even though Joe isn't there. I never realized how an ordinary morning could carve wounds that never quite fade. Back then I was 24, still living with my parents in Fairview, a small city tucked into a quiet valley that always felt too calm, too safe, like nothing bad could ever take root there. My twin brother, Harper, and I had been running together every morning at 7 on the dot for years. It wasn't just exercise anymore. It had become our ritual, a silent contract between us. Sometimes it felt like a competition, but mostly it was the one thing that kept us tethered in a way nothing else did. Our parents' house sat on a sleepy residential street, lined with mailboxes and cracked sidewalks. But our route stretched well beyond that. We had mapped out a loop across the city, starting at the same point, splitting off in opposite directions, then meeting halfway on Main Street. Whoever reached the halfway point first always bragged, but the teasing never meant much. What mattered was the rhythm, the routine, the comfort of knowing we'd always meet again in the middle. That morning is etched into my memory. It was late spring, the kind of morning where the air was cool and sharp, like it could wake you better than a gallon of coffee. Harper was in the kitchen, bent over, double knotting his laces with that focus he always had before a run. "You're going down today," I said, filling my water bottle, trying to sound cocky. He smirked without looking up. "You've been saying that all week." "Yeah, but this time I mean it." I looped my earbuds around my neck. He finally looked at me, grinning that twin brother grin, part challenge, part bond. No one else in the world could grin like that at me. Upstairs, the house was still. Dad would be awake soon for work, his alarm probably minutes away. Mom was out cold. She worked nights at the hospital and mornings were her dead hours. Everything about it felt safe, predictable. We stepped out onto the driveway, stretched, and without ceremony, I veered left while Harper cut right. Just like always. The city was only just waking up. From the distance came the hum of cars down Main. Sprinklers ticked across front lawns. Birds scattered and regrouped along telephone wires. My route curved past the edge of town, where Main Street brushed against a line of run-down apartment complexes. The buildings had always made me uneasy, not because I knew of any danger there, but because they looked forgotten. Paint peeled off in wide flakes. Railings rusted along sagging balconies. Crooked blinds hung like broken bones. They were the kind of places people drifted to when they had nowhere else left to go. That morning, as my shoes slapped against the pavement, something made me glance to the side. Through a break in the hedges, I saw her, a woman. She stood motionless among the trees, half her body swallowed by shadow. Her skin looked pale in the gray morning light, her face blank, eyes locked directly on me. The sight made my stomach tighten, but I forced myself not to slow down, not to stare. Maybe she was just a tenant stepping out early. Maybe she was waiting for someone. But there was something about the stillness of her body, the way her head didn't shift even an inch, her gaze following me like a spotlight that made my skin crawl. I kept running, heartbeat picking up, trying to shake the image of her eyes from my head. 10 minutes later, Harper and I met at the halfway point. We always slapped hands when we passed, a wordless checkpoint that meant we were both still moving, both still here. He flashed me a grin, breathless but strong, before sprinting past me down the sidewalk. That grin burned into my memory, because it was the last time I saw him the way he was. When I got home, Harper wasn't back yet. I didn't panic at first. Sometimes he cooled down longer than I did. I showered, scrambled some eggs, sat at the table scrolling through my phone. By the time an hour passed, unease settled in like a knot in my chest. I called him. My hands shook as I pressed the phone to my ear. The line clicked. "Yeah, I'm on my way back." Harper's voice came, strained and uneven. Relief rushed me, but it didn't last. "Where have you been? You okay?" I need to tell you and Mom and Dad something," he said. "What? What happened?" My voice cracked sharper than I meant. Silence pressed on the line. Then, "I'll tell you when I get there." When Harper finally came through the front door, everything about him looked wrong. His skin had gone pale, his face hollow. His eyes were wide and vacant, like he'd just stared at something no one was meant to see. "What happened?" I asked as soon as Harper stepped inside. He looked shaken, his voice trembling when he answered. "On Main Street, by those apartments," he said quietly. "I saw her, Henry. A woman was there, hanging from the trees." His words caught, his throat tight. And then this man, her husband, I think, came running out, shouting, crying, saying he couldn't believe she'd done it. He tried to help her, but it was too late. I froze, my stomach twisting. My mind went back to the pale woman I'd seen earlier that morning, standing so still, her eyes locked on me. "Harper," I whispered. "I think I saw her too, but she wasn't hanging. She was standing there, watching me." His face went pale, twisting with confusion and disbelief. "That's not possible," he muttered. He shook his head hard, as though trying to push the thought away. "Don't say that." The police came soon after. Harper gave them his statement, They said it looked like a suicide. The husband was devastated, but to them, it was closed. No suspicion, just another tragedy. For the world, it ended there. But for us, it didn't. I couldn't shake the image of her eyes, the way they seemed to plead with me. And Harper couldn't stop thinking about the husband's reaction, how quickly he had appeared. It gnawed at him. We stopped running. Weeks passed in a haze. Harper hardly slept. He grew quiet, distant, shutting me out. When I tried to bring it up, he snapped, his voice raw. I wish I'd never gone that way. I wish I hadn't seen her. Those words haunted me. Months later, he was gone. Not in a sudden, violent way, but in the slow fading that grief can bring when someone carries more weight than they can bear. One morning, Harper simply didn't wake. The loss hollowed out everything. Grief is strange. It seeps in, feeding on memories, twisting them. I blamed myself. If I had looked closer, if I had paid attention, maybe things would have been different. Desperate for understanding, I found an online forum for twins who had lost their siblings. It felt like salvation. Finally, I wasn't alone. One person stood out. She called herself Lena, said she had lost her twin sister in the same way. We began messaging every day. I told her things I'd never spoken aloud. My anger at Harper, my confusion, my guilt. She listened, reassured me, told me she understood. Until one morning I woke to find my private confessions exposed on the forum. My name, my phone number, my address, posted for strangers to see. Angry messages poured in, people calling me cruel, heartless. I confronted Lena, desperate for an explanation. Her reply chilled me. Asterisk. You don't remember me, do you? I was Harper's ex. Your family kept me away from his funeral. You all blamed me. I told you I'd make you pay, and now I have. Everything clicked. Her story, her sympathy, the way she pulled secrets out of me. She had known me all along. After that, my family felt watched. Strange calls, unsettling messages, small things that left us on edge. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to wear us down. Eventually, I changed my number, moved away, left everything behind. And yet, even now, in quiet hours of the night, I sometimes wake certain I hear Harper's voice calling softly, like he's still nearby. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I see a pale figure standing still in the shadows, watching. The woman on Main Street, Harper, Lena. They all blur together now, like threads of the same knot I can never untangle. I wonder if things might have changed had I turned my head fully that morning, or if it was already too late. I never thought a simple shopping trip with my little sister would turn into one of the scariest memories I'd carry with me. At 17, I was old enough to drive, old enough to babysit, but still caught in that awkward place between wanting independence and not quite knowing who I was. Ila, my little sister, was only 5 then. She was tiny, but full of chatter, sharp in ways that sometimes made her seem older than her age. She copied everything I did. The way I held a cup, the way I leaned when I walked, even the little phrases I tossed around without thinking. Mom used to laugh and say, "She's not your sister, she's your shadow." Our parents weren't home much. Mom worked long hospital shifts, often walking through the door after midnight, exhausted. Dad drove delivery routes that kept him away for days sometimes. That left me with Illa more often than not. I didn't complain. She trusted me completely, and for all the moments she got under my skin, I liked knowing she saw me as the person who kept her safe. That Saturday, Mom pressed a $40 bill into my hand. "Back to school clothes," she said. "One outfit for Isla, nothing too crazy, straight there, straight back." She gave me the look that meant, "Don't mess around asterisk." The day is still sharp in my memory. The air was warm but heavy, clouds hanging low like they couldn't decide whether to break. Isla was already bouncing around the kitchen, her sparkly sneakers lighting up with each hop. "Lucas," she chirped, tugging at my shirt. "Can I get a dress? One that spins when I twirl?" I smirked and ruffled her hair. "We'll see. But not 5 of them. Mom gave me $40, not $1 million. She wrinkled her nose and stuck out her tongue. "You're mean." "Uh-huh. You'll thank me when you're older," I teased. By the time we pulled into the Westfield Market Center parking lot, Illa had already laid out her plan like a little general. Toy aisle first, then clothes, and if I wasn't paying attention, candy. That was our rhythm. And just like always, before we started, we made a pit stop at the small coffee shop near the entrance. I ordered a cold brew to wake myself up and a cake pop for her because I wasn't heartless. While we waited at the counter, I leaned against the wall and pulled out my phone, mindlessly scrolling. That's when I noticed him. A man sat alone at one of the small tables nearby. Everything about him was black. Hoodie, jeans, even the cap pulled low over his face. He had no coffee, no bag, no laptop, nothing to suggest he was there for the cafe. He just sat, staring at nothing in particular, hands resting too still on the table. At first, I brushed it off. People linger in public spaces all the time. But there was something off about his posture. He wasn't slouched or relaxed. He was watching. Not me directly, but watchful, like he was waiting for something. "Lucas," Illa piped up, tugging at my arm again. "Is my cake pop ready yet?" "Almost," I said, forcing a smile, though I kept my eyes flicking back toward the man. When the barista finally called our order, I grabbed the drink and the small bag. I took Illa's hand, maybe tighter than usual, and instead of walking past the man, I veered us down a side aisle that wrapped around toward the clothing section. "Why are we going this way?" Illa asked, skipping to keep up with my pace. "Shortcut," I lied without hesitation. The girls' clothing section opened up like a burst of color. Racks of dresses, shirts, and tiny sparkly shoes lined up neatly under bright overhead lights. For a second, I tried to let the brightness wash away the unease tightening in my chest. Illa darted straight toward a display of pink sweaters, her sparkly sneakers flashing with every step. "This one? Oh, and this one too," she shouted, holding up 2 outfits like she had just discovered treasure. I forced a smile, pretending to weigh them seriously. "Try them on. We'll see which one works." But then my stomach dropped. Through a narrow gap between the racks of clothes, I saw him. The same man from the cafe. He wasn't holding clothes, not even pretending to browse. He was just standing there, a few feet away, watching us. The second our eyes met, he turned abruptly, grabbed a random shirt off the rack and studied it like it mattered. But I knew better. My throat tightened, heart thudding in my chest. I wanted to grab Illa and run straight for the exit, but the last thing I wanted was to make her panic. "Come on," I said softly, forcing calm into my voice. "Let's check out the fitting rooms." The fitting rooms were a plain hallway with identical stalls on each side. No cozy chairs, no mirrors outside, just a corridor that suddenly felt too quiet. I guided Illa into one of the stalls and pulled the door shut behind her. She wriggled into the first dress, then burst out laughing as she spun around. "Look, it twirls." "It looks good," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. But my voice came out distracted, shaky. My eyes were fixed on the gap under the door, half expecting to see someone's shoes stop right outside. When she finally changed back into her clothes, I opened the door and froze. He was sitting on the bench directly across from us, facing the entrance like he had been waiting. My pulse slammed so hard it hurt. Asterisk. Maybe he's waiting for someone. Maybe. But deep down, I didn't believe it. I didn't let Illa see the fear in my face. I just took her hand and steered her quickly out of the hallway. "Come on, let's grab Mom's stuff." We ducked into the beauty section. Illa wandered to a display of face masks, her little fingers tracing the colorful packaging. I tried to focus on mascara, but a flicker of movement pulled my attention. At the end of the aisle, there he was again, phone in hand, and I swear the camera was angled toward us. Panic surged through me, cold and electric. I crouched down to Illa's level, my voice low and urgent. "Stay close to me, okay? Don't wander. Just hold my hand." Her eyes widened. "Why? What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied. "Just stay close." We hurried toward the registers. Every time I glanced back, he was there. Never too close, never far enough away. Just watching. At the checkout, I leaned forward, lowering my voice so only the cashier could hear. "Listen, I think that guy back there is following us. Can someone walk us to our car?" Her eyes flicked past me, then back. The color drained from her face. "1 second." She picked up the phone and paged security. Within moments, a guard appeared, a tall man in a Navy uniform, his expression sharp and steady. "I'll walk you out," he said firmly. Illa's hand tightened around mine. She knew now. Kids always know. As we stepped outside, I spotted him again, lingering near the doors, still watching. But the moment he saw the guard beside us, his whole posture changed. His head jerked up, his steps quickened. Then he turned sharply and jogged toward a dark van parked at the far end of the lot. The engine roared to life, and before we even reached our car, the van peeled out, tires screeching, and disappeared into the street. The guard stayed with us until we were inside and the doors were locked. He gave me a firm nod. "You kids take care. You did the right thing." As I pulled out of the parking lot, my hands trembled on the wheel. Illa sat in the back seat, hugging her new dress still wrapped in plastic, her cheek pressed against the window. "Lucas?" she asked softly. "Yeah?" "Why was that man following us?" I swallowed hard. My throat burned. "I don't know. But he's gone now." The truth? I still don't know what his intentions were. And that's what makes it worse. If I hadn't listened to the tight knot in my gut, if I hadn't spoken up to the cashier, if security hadn't been there, things could have ended very differently. That thought follows me even now. Always listen to your instincts, especially when someone else's safety depends on it. I never imagined my teenage years would be defined more by duty than freedom. Most kids my age whined about teachers piling on homework, long practices, or weekend shifts at fast food joints. For me, high school wasn't just about grades and trying to fit in. It was about raising my little sister. There's a 12-year gap between me and Laya. When I was 17, she was 3, tiny, bright-eyed, curls bouncing everywhere, and bursting with more energy than I could keep up with. Our parents, Daniel and Marissa, both pulled double shifts at Brookhaven General Hospital. Dad a respiratory therapist, Mom an ER nurse. Their schedules rarely matched. If one was coming home, the other was just leaving, and somewhere in the middle I picked up the slack. Most afternoons it was my job to scoop Laya up from daycare, feed her a snack, keep her entertained, and make sure she didn't climb the bookshelf or dump juice on the carpet before dinner time. I never resented it. If anything, she softened me. She was still young enough to mispronounce my name. Ethan became Ethan, and every time she said it, I felt this warmth in my chest I couldn't quite explain. She'd come barreling out of daycare with her tiny sneakers smacking the floor, arms outstretched, clutching crayon drawings with sticky fingers. She'd wrap herself around my legs like a koala, already rambling about her day with a breathless excitement I could never fake about mine. Her daycare was this old 2-story Victorian on the edge of town, converted into something that felt more like a grandmother's house than a child care center. Harold and Evelyn Whitford ran the place, both in their late 60s. Evelyn, with her silver hair always pinned into a bun, smelled faintly of lavender. She had this soft, unhurried way about her that made you feel safe. Harold was quieter, more reserved, but when he did speak, his voice carried a certain weight, like you should listen carefully because he wouldn't waste words. The inside of their home was a collage of pastel-painted walls, finger-painted art taped up in lopsided rows, shelves stuffed with plush animals, and the faint hum of lullabies playing from an old speaker. Out back, there was a little play yard, swings, a weathered wooden playset, and a patch of grass scattered with trikes and rubber balls. Every weekday at 3:15, I'd pull our dented Honda Civic into their gravel driveway, head inside, and find Laya. Evelyn would always hand me her backpack and give me a gentle update. "She painted today, Ethan. Lots of blue. Said it was the sky." Or, "She and Emma played house for almost an hour. Such a little caretaker." That routine stitched my afternoons together. Until one Tuesday in October. That day, I walked in and found Laya kneeling by the dollhouse, lining up tiny figurines in neat rows like soldiers. She looked up, spotted me, and her whole face lit up. She ran straight at me, colliding with my legs hard enough to nearly knock me off balance. I scooped her up, laughing even as she squeezed me around the neck. From her rocking chair in the corner, Evelyn smiled. "She had another good day," she said kindly, her voice carrying that slow, soothing rhythm of hers. "Played mostly outside. She's really taken to the swings." "That's good," I said, taking the little purple backpack from her hands. But then Evelyn lowered her voice just slightly, leaning closer. "She's been talking about a new friend, a boy." Before I could ask more, Laya tugged at my sleeve, impatient to leave. In the car, I buckled her into her booster seat, the straps clicking into place. "So, Bug?" I asked as I started the engine. "Who's this new friend?" "His name's Owen," she chirped without hesitation. I frowned, trying to place the name. I'd heard her talk about Emma, Nora, Finn, kids I knew. But Owen? Nothing. "What's he like?" I asked, pulling out of the driveway. "He's funny," she said matter-of-factly. "He pushes me on the swing higher than anyone else, and he likes juice boxes." I smiled faintly, nodding along, half listening while my mind drifted toward the pile of calculus homework waiting at home. That night at dinner, Mom asked, "How was daycare today?" "Good," Laya answered with her usual cheer. "She played with some kid named Owen," I added casually, scooping pasta onto my plate. Mom froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Who?" she asked sharply. "Owen," I repeated, her brow furrowed. "Ethan, I've met almost every kid there. There isn't an Owen." I shrugged, trying to brush it off. Maybe he's new? But something in the way her voice faltered, just for a second, made the back of my neck prickle with unease. The weeks that followed blurred together in the usual rhythm of school, homework, and daycare pickups. But Owen kept slipping into our lives like a shadow we couldn't shake. Laya talked about him constantly. She drew him into her crayon pictures, a little blonde boy with a crooked smile always standing close beside her. In the car, she'd giggle as if he were sitting right next to her, whispering secrets in her ear. Sometimes she'd pause mid-sentence, listening to a silence I couldn't hear, then laugh like she was answering a joke. One Wednesday, I came home from school drained, my head throbbing from a chemistry test I probably failed. I dropped my backpack by the door and wandered into the dining room. Laya was there, hunched over a sheet of paper at the table, her tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in that way she always did when she was concentrating. Normally, she was quick to jump up, to shove her latest masterpiece into my hands. But today, she stayed strangely quiet, the only sound the scratch of wax against paper. "What are you working on, Bug?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Without a word, she tilted the page toward me. My stomach knotted instantly. It was her, unmistakably her, with her mess of curls and her favorite polka dot dress. Next to her stood a boy with short blonde hair, but he wasn't standing, not really. He was lying face down in what looked like a pool of water, jagged blue waves surrounding him, two heavy black X's scrawled over his eyes. "Laya," I said slowly, my voice catching in my throat. "What's this supposed to be?" "That's me and Owen," she replied, still coloring, not looking at me. My mouth went dry. "What's he doing in the pool?" She stopped. Carefully, she set her crayon down and lifted her gaze to mine. Her eyes were wide, serious, too serious for a 3-year-old. My skin prickled. "He's dead." A nervous laugh slipped out before I could stop it. "That's not very nice, Bug." You don't draw your friends like that." "He doesn't mind," she said calmly, almost dismissively, and picked her crayon back up. I stood there frozen, staring at the drawing, the hair on the back of my neck rising as though the room had suddenly turned colder. A few nights later, while my parents texted that they'd be late again, I was making chili for just me and Leia. I set a bowl on the table and called upstairs. "Dinner's ready." No answer. "Leia?" I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. I sighed, wiped my hands on a dish towel and trudged upstairs. Her bedroom door was cracked open. From inside I heard her small voice. "Why can't I tell Ethan?" "Oh, okay, I won't." She paused, listening, then giggled. "You're silly, Owen." My throat tightened. I pushed the door open just a little wider. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, facing the corner. Her toy swing, the one Harold had hung from the ceiling beam for her, was swaying gently, though she was nowhere near it. "Leia?" My voice came out sharper than I meant. She startled, spinning toward me, her cheeks flushed. "Ethan, you scared me." I stepped inside, trying not to look at the swing still moving behind her. "Who were you talking to?" Her lip trembled. "Owen." "There's no one here," I said firmly, forcing the words through a tight jaw. She shook her head fiercely, curls bouncing. "Yes, there is. He's my friend. He said not to tell you, but he's here. He's always here." Her words chilled me more than the draft sneaking in through the cracked window. That night, I told my parents everything. The drawing, the swing, the voices. I even showed them the picture. Dad tried to brush it off as an overactive imagination, but Mom's face went pale. Her hands trembled when she set down her glass of water. She promised she'd talk to Evelyn and Harold. The next afternoon, when I picked Leia up, I lingered instead of rushing her to the car. Evelyn was tidying up a pile of blocks, Harold stacking nap mats into the corner. My heart pounded as I asked, "Has Leia ever mentioned someone named Owen while she's here?" They both froze. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Harold's shoulders slumped heavily. Finally, Harold cleared his throat, his voice gravelly. "What did she tell you?" "That she plays with him," I said carefully. "That he's her friend." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. She sank into the rocking chair as if her legs couldn't hold her anymore. "Our son's name was Owen," she whispered. The room tilted around me. "He drowned," Harold said quietly, staring at the floor. "In the backyard pool, 21 years ago." A shiver crawled down my spine, leaving me cold all over like I'd stepped into ice water. That night, my parents called Father Brennan from St. Mary's Parish. 2 days later, he came to bless the house with holy water and prayer. Leia fidgeted during the ceremony, restless, whispering under her breath as if someone unseen was tugging at her attention. Afterward, she stopped mentioning Owen. Her drawings went back to rainbows and dogs and messy stick figure families. The swing in her room sat still. But sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her murmuring faintly in her sleep. Once, when I leaned close, I swore I heard her whisper, "I'll see you at the swings." Years have passed. Leia's 13 now, full of attitude and rolling eyes, with barely any memory of her early years at the Whitfords. But I remember everything. I remember that drawing, the swing moving on its own, the way Evelyn's face crumpled when she heard her dead son's name spoken by my sister's lips. And every time I drive past that old Victorian house on the edge of Brookhaven, my stomach twists. The backyard playset still stands there, weather-worn but upright, and I swear, if you slow down enough, sometimes you can see a small blonde boy swaying on the swing, waiting for someone to push him higher. I never used to think twice about babysitting my little sister. I was 14 when Nora was born. The age gap between us was huge, 12 years, and by the time she came into the picture, I was already used to being the only kid in the house. My parents hadn't planned on another child. Mom told me once with this soft smile that Nora was their little miracle. At first, I didn't know how to process it. I had grown so used to being the center of their world, the one they came to school plays for, the one who filled every inch of the fridge with finger paintings and report cards. And then suddenly, there she was. But something in me shifted the first time I held her. She was so small, fragile, her tiny hands curling around my finger like she was afraid to let go. She always clung to me, and it didn't take long before I felt this overwhelming need to protect her. By the time she was 2, I had slipped into this role that was half big brother, half stand-in babysitter. Mom and Dad worked long hours, Dad at the firehouse, Mom pulling double shifts in the ER, so most evenings fell on me. I didn't mind. Honestly, I loved it. Nora was funny and sweet, toddling through the house with her squeaky little voice repeating words she barely understood. But then, strange things started happening. It was a Thursday night when I first noticed something wasn't right. We were in the living room of our small place in Maplewood, Illinois, sitting on the couch. One of her favorite cartoons flickered on the TV, colors bouncing across her wide brown eyes. She sat cross-legged, clutching her blanket to her chest, completely absorbed. I was scrolling through my phone, not paying much attention, when she tugged on my sleeve. "Hungry, hungry," she chirped in her broken toddler words. "All right, kiddo," I said, sliding my phone into my pocket. "Let's get you some dinner." I stepped into the kitchen, our narrow little suburban kitchen with its white cabinets and the counter that looked back toward the living room. I grabbed a box of pasta from the pantry. That's when Nora screamed, not a whine, not a startled cry. A full, blood-curdling, throat-tearing scream that jolted through me like an electric current. The box slipped from my hands and clattered across the floor. My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted back into the living room. She was still on the couch, wide-eyed, her face pale. "Nora? What's wrong? What happened?" My eyes darted around the room, scanning the curtains, the windows, half expecting to see someone standing there. Nothing. She just stared at me for a long, strange moment. Then her lips curved into this unsettling grin I had never seen before, a grin too knowing for a 2-year-old. And she said, clear as day, no stutter, no broken syllables, "I got you." I froze. Nora was 2. At that age, her speech was still a mess, words chopped up, syllables misplaced. But that sentence had rolled out perfectly, sharp and deliberate, like she'd been rehearsing it. I forced out a laugh even though my chest was tight. "You scared me half to death, Squirt," I muttered, ruffling her hair. She giggled, but the sound made my stomach turn. Inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A couple of nights later, it happened again. I was at the counter chopping vegetables for dinner, the rhythmic scrape of the knife against the cutting board filling the silence, when I heard the soft patter of little feet against the linoleum. Nora toddled in, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one ear. "Danny," she said suddenly. My head snapped toward her. "What?" "Danny," she repeated, eyes too calm for her age. "My name isn't Danny," I said slowly. "It's Mateo. You know that." She didn't answer. Instead, she lifted her tiny arm and pointed down the dim hallway. "There's a man in the hallway." The words hollowed me out. My blood went cold, the knife trembling in my hand. I stared at the shadowed hall, my pulse hammering in my ears, waiting, half certain someone would step out. Every thought collided in my head at once. Had I locked the doors? Did someone break in? I gripped the knife tighter, though it was just a dull butter knife, and forced myself to move. Each step toward that hallway felt like wading through water, heavy and slow, my skin prickling as though unseen eyes were on me. The light from the kitchen barely spilled past the entryway, leaving the hallway smothered in shadows. I swallowed hard, my chest tight as I leaned around the corner. Nothing, just beige carpet stretching down the hall, the doors to the bedrooms closed, the silence heavy. Still, the air felt wrong, as if something had just slipped out of sight. When I returned to the living room, Nora was smiling. Not her usual goofy grin, but something else. Quiet, satisfied, like she knew a secret I didn't. Things escalated after that. Sometimes we'd be sitting on the floor with her blocks, stacking them into uneven towers, when she'd suddenly stop, tilt her head toward the wall, and whisper, "Baby on the wall." Other times she'd laugh at nothing, except it wasn't a baby's laugh. It was deeper, sharper, mocking, a sound that made my skin prickle and my stomach knot. The worst was one night around 3 in the morning. I'd been up cramming for a biology test when her cries cut through the silence. "Nora?" I whispered as I pushed open the nursery door. The nightlight glowed faintly orange, painting the room in dim, hazy light. She sat upright in her crib, cheeks streaked with tears. The second she saw me, she pointed to the closet. "The man in the closet," she whimpered. I froze. The closet door hung half open, nothing visible beyond the sliver of blackness. My instincts screamed at me to slam it shut, to fling it open. Do something. But every horror movie I'd ever seen told me that was the worst possible idea. My hands shook as I scooped her up instead. "Come on," I murmured, forcing calm into my voice. "You're sleeping in my room tonight." But as I carried her across the threshold, she leaned close to my ear and whispered, perfectly clear, no stammer, no hesitation, "I want to stay with the man." My stomach lurched, 2 years old, barely able to string 3 words together on most days. And yet whenever she spoke about him, it was flawless. When I told my parents, they brushed it off. "Kids say creepy things all the time." Dad chuckled, shaking his head. "She's got an imagination." "You probably said weird stuff too," Mom added, patting my shoulder. "It's normal, Mateo. Don't spook yourself." But it didn't feel normal. Not when she started laughing at the wrong moments. One Saturday morning, we were watching Trolls. Nora sat on my lap, her feet kicking against my knees, a juice pouch clutched in her little hands. When the trolls were captured and dropped into cooking pots, she laughed. Not a sweet giggle, but a cold, sharp laugh that felt too big for her body. It made the hair on my arms stand on end. She laughed like she wanted them to burn. Later, when the trolls escaped and everyone on screen cheered, I glanced down at her face. She wasn't smiling. She looked disappointed, and it kept happening. The perfect speech when she whispered about him, the strange smiles, the hollow laughter. Each incident chipped away at me until I started locking my door at night, stopped staying up late, avoided the hallway altogether. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, her words clung to me. "There's a man in the hallway. The man in the closet. I want to stay with the man." It was always the man. And eventually I started to wonder, maybe she wasn't imagining him. Maybe he was imagining her. The last night I babysat her, everything came to a head. It was close to midnight. Mom and Dad were both on night shifts. Nora had fallen asleep curled up on the couch while I finished my homework. I carried her upstairs, tucked her into her crib, and shut the light off. Halfway down the stairs, I froze. The laugh. Low, mocking, layered. Not hers alone, but something older buried beneath it, echoing with her. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Mateo." Her voice drifted down the stairs. I turned, slow, dread building like lead in my chest. She was standing at the top, out of her crib, her eyes wide and glassy, her grin stretching too far. "The man says come play." The air shifted, heavier, colder, pressing against my skin, and in the corner, just past the reach of the light, I saw it. Tall, still, watching. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then, just as suddenly, Nora blinked, yawned, rubbed her eyes. Her voice cracked back into baby talk. "Hungry," she mumbled, words stumbling again. The figure was gone. I never told my parents what I saw. To this day, I don't know if it was exhaustion, my imagination breaking under stress, or if Nora really saw something I wasn't supposed to. She's 4 now. She doesn't mention the man anymore. But some nights, when I walk past her room, I hear her whispering. Not baby talk, not clear speech, something in between. And sometimes, God help me, I swear there's another voice whispering back. I never thought so much of my 20s would be spent circling around death. Not the poetic, far-off kind people quote from books or that you overhear at funerals when old relatives sigh about the meaning of life. No, I mean death that feels close enough to touch. Death like a shadow pressed against the wall of your room, waiting, listening, patient. My name's Luna. I'm 23. I grew up in a quiet corner of Portland, Oregon, the kind of neighborhood where lawns stayed trimmed and kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. My brother Leo is 3 years older, 26 now, and for most of my life, he's been my anchor. The one person I believed would never drift too far from me. Our parents split when I was 8, and the ground under us cracked open. Mom drowned herself in back-to-back hospital shifts, gone more than she was present. Dad vanished into another family, like he couldn't wait to erase us from his old one. That left Leo, my brother, my stand-in parent, my protector. He slipped into that role without asking, like he'd been drafted. We raised each other in ways kids shouldn't have to. He used to joke we weren't really two people. God screwed up, Luna, he'd say with a grin that never reached his eyes. He was making one person and split us in half. You got the stubborn part, I got the angry part. I'd laugh with him, but something about his tone always clung to me, like he wasn't entirely joking. We survived high school together, holding each other up when friends flaked, when money ran dry, when Dad stopped calling altogether. Leo kept me steady, and I kept him from snapping in half. We were a team, and that team felt unbreakable. That's why what happened that summer still feels unreal. Like trying to explain a nightmare while you're still half asleep. It started with a road trip. Leo had been saving from his auto shop job and I had just crawled out of a miserable freshman year of college, where every hallway felt like a reminder I didn't belong. One night he tossed me the keys. Let's get out of Portland, just drive until the car doesn't want to anymore. I said yes. I always said yes to Leo. We drove east, through mountain passes, across towns that looked like time forgot them, boarded windows, rusted signs clinging to life. We stayed in motels that reeked of bleach and stale smoke, and for a week it was perfect. Bad diner coffee, long stretches of road, the kind of conversations that only happen when there's nothing but highway and silence pressing against the windows. Then came Boise. It was past midnight when we pulled into a gas station. The lot was washed in the sickly glow of 2 buzzing lamps. The convenience store sat nearly empty. A lone cashier slumped behind the counter. I ducked inside for snacks while Leo stayed by the car. When I came back out, the bag of chips crinkling in my hand, I froze. Leo wasn't moving. He was standing by the pump, shoulders tight, eyes locked on someone across the lot. At first I thought it was some drunk messing with him, but then my stomach dropped. The man standing opposite him wasn't just similar. He was Leo, down to the crooked nose he'd broken in middle school, the scar etched along his jawline, the same posture, arms loose at his sides but tense, like springs. It was as if a mirror had slipped out of place and spat him into the world. I stopped breathing. My fingers tightened around the bottle of water until it squeaked. The other Leo spoke first. His voice carried across the empty lot, low, steady, and identical to my brother's. "Who are you?" My Leo opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He just stared, wide-eyed, lips parted, chest rising fast like he couldn't catch air. The second Leo tilted his head, studying him with an expression that made my skin crawl. There was recognition there, like he thought my asterisk Leo was the fake one. "Leo," I whispered, my voice breaking. But he didn't turn. The silence stretched so long I thought I'd scream. Then, suddenly, Leo stumbled back. His hands trembled. He looked like he was suffocating. Without warning, he bolted. He sprinted straight past me, shoved himself into the car, keys rattling as he fought to jam them into the ignition. "Go, Luna!" he shouted, his voice splintering. I scrambled into the passenger seat, barely pulling the door closed before the tires shrieked against the asphalt, the gas station shrinking in the rear view. I twisted in my seat, heart pounding as I looked back through the rear window. The other Leo was still there under that buzzing lamp, standing perfectly still. His face, my brother's face, tilted just enough to catch the glow. He didn't look angry or even curious. He looked disappointed, as if we'd failed him somehow by leaving. That night in the motel, Leo couldn't settle. He sat hunched on the edge of the bed, his elbows digging into his knees, hands covering his face. His voice was raw, cracked, almost childlike as he whispered to himself over and over. "It wasn't real. It wasn't real. Tell me it wasn't real, Luna." I wanted to. I wanted to lie. But I couldn't. I'd seen him too. My silence must have said enough, because when Leo finally lifted his head, his eyes were rimmed red, his face hollow. He looked at me like he already knew the answer. "Luna," he said, voice trembling, "if you meet your double, it means you're going to die. I've heard that before. It's an omen." My chest went cold. "That's just some stupid superstition," I told him, forcing steadiness into my voice. "You're fine. You're fine, Leo." But he only shook his head, slow and certain. No, I could feel it. That wasn't just someone who looked like me. It was me. Like God made two versions, and now he's trying to fix the mistake. The way he said it made my stomach clench. It was the same heavy tone he used as a kid when he'd whisper that we weren't meant to exist separately, the days after Boise became unbearable. Leo started to change. His body ached constantly. His skin dried out, cracked in strange, jagged lines like porcelain splitting under pressure. At first, I told myself it was stress, but each day it got worse. He said his chest felt heavy, like stone was filling his lungs. We went to doctors. They drew blood, ran scans, prodded and shrugged. Autoimmune, one said, but couldn't name which. Another muttered, almost to himself, "I've never seen anything like this." Every appointment ended the same. Confusion, half answers, no relief. Leo grew restless, frantic. He drowned himself in workouts, choked down handfuls of vitamins, devoured articles about rare diseases. I'd wake at night to find him in the bathroom, staring into the mirror, fingertips tracing the cracks on his face, his reflection barely recognizable. And sometimes, only sometimes, when the lights flickered across the glass, I swear another shape stood behind him. The worst came one night when he woke screaming. I bolted upright to find him shaking, drenched in sweat, eyes wide with terror. He clung to me, sobbing, his words tumbling out in gasps. "I saw him again," he cried. In my dream, he was lying there, burned to ash. He looked at me before he crumbled. I tried to calm him, but the truth was I was just as scared, because his dream wasn't the worst part. The worst was that his skin really was cracking, thin red lines splitting open, faint blood seeping like something underneath was pressing to get out. "If I disappear, Luna," he whispered one night, voice so fragile I almost didn't hear it, "I want you to remember, maybe I was never supposed to be here." I slapped his arm, tears hot on my face. "Don't you dare say that. You're my brother. You're real. You don't get to give up on me." He gave me the faintest smile, weak but warm. "You always were the strong one." And then, impossibly, things shifted. Slowly, Leo started to recover. The more he fought, forcing his body to move, forcing himself to eat right, refusing to surrender, the stronger he grew. The cracks began to fade. The bleeding stopped. His breathing eased. Within weeks, his body steadied itself, almost like he'd wrestled something unseen and won. He looked healthier than ever. He even glowed sometimes, like light had returned to him. I didn't understand it, but I didn't care. I had my brother back. Still, the question gnawed at me. If this asterisk Leo was here with me, healing, living, then where was the other one? Months passed. Life smoothed out. We don't talk about Boise, not directly. But sometimes I catch Leo staring out the window too long, eyes distant, jaw tight, and I know his thoughts are back there under that buzzing lamp. And sometimes, lying awake at night, I remember that other Leo, his expression, the disappointment etched into a face that shouldn't have existed. I don't know if God changed his mind, or if my brother clawed his way out of fate. But one thought stalks me endlessly. If there are two Leos, then maybe balance demands one must still burn. And what terrifies me most is the possibility that next time, it won't be him. It'll be me.